The employer tax incentive has been in existence for 10 years. It incentivizes employers to employ young people. When the employer absorbs these young people, they get a tax benefit. In instances where it's worked, it has proven to be beneficial.
The intention behind this, the employment tax incentive is definitely, there are definitely advantages there, given that it, promotes the employment of youth. But unfortunately, like with any tax incentive, there is some exploitation.
Employee body, the National Employers Association of South Africa, NIASA, says the job crisis is bigger than the scheme created.
It's a good idea. It's a good incentive. I think, however, the problem with employment in the country is it's more structural. We're not competitive. The economy is not growing. Companies are closing down. Companies are shrinking, and that causes unemployment. So if people were not going to employ in any event because they don't have positions, something like the ETI is not going to convince them to employ.
Changes were made to the employment tax incentive of 2013 in 2021 and 2023 to curb the abuse of the incentive by aggressive tax schemes which used training institutions to claim the incentive. SARS and National Treasury want punitive measures to support these amendments to be refined in the legislation to address the abusive behavior of certain taxpayers.
There have been a number of schemes there where, for example, they would sign up students for training. A company would sign students up for training. They would get them to sign a piece of paper. And then that company would put that student on the payroll and claim an employment tax incentive, but they would not be paying that individual for anything. In effect, they would say that the training is covered by the cost of their wage, and then they would just claim the incentive. And that is completely against the rationale of the scheme and undermines this incentive and employment generation. So we need to try and close these types of schemes down. Otherwise, it will lead to a loss in revenue for no additional benefit.
Pasquini details some of the examples they have observed of this practice.
We've been involved in quite a number of big SARS audits involving tens of millions of rands where SARS has, conducted thorough, almost forensic investigations. So just to give you an example on that, we've seen that they will sometimes contact employees who are, engaged in these training colleges schemes and ask the employees whether they are aware of the employer or the company. And many times the employees don't even know that they're employed under an employment contract, supposedly with the training college. And SARS then comes and presents overwhelming evidence against an employer. And often the employer is not even aware that what they were doing was unlawful. So it does beg the question a little bit, to what extent is an employer guilty, or to what extent are they being taken advantage of by these shrewd training colleges?
We have been approached by some service providers who, in our view, abuses the scheme. And we told them straight out, we're not interested in introducing you to our members because we believe it's a scam. Because what they basically do is, so how the ETI works is, an employer is supposed to employ a young person between 18 and 29. He earns something between 2,000 and 6,500 rand. And depending on what he earns and how long the contract is, the employer can deduct a certain amount from the pay as you earn that he needs to pay over to SARS. There's a little formula they use depending on what he's earning. But a requirement of the ETI Act is that young person, that employee, actually needs to work with the employer. So that employer has to keep a record of what this employee has done, how many hours he has worked at the employer. And that was an amendment that came in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, which said that they must actually work in the workplace. So then what these service providers did is they said, okay, now what we'll do is we'll sign a limited duration contract with this person, with this young person, and we masquerade it as a type of a bursary. So we as a training provider will provide training for the employee, and the employer pays that salary of the employee over to the training provider. And actually, in fact, factoring that employee must use his salary to pay for his training. So effectively, he gets nothing out, and the employer claims the ETI. So they put 100 employees on, but that person is never in the workplace of the employer. It's never there. And that's how they try to get around it. And we said, if you're not interested in this, it's obviously a scheme. It's not the intention of the Act. So it has been abused.
With a drive to boost in the country an urgent priority, the employment tax incentive could be one of the many policy items the Minister of Finances raises in his tabling of the midterm budget. Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.